All right, well, we're here with something I think is very exciting today. This, if you've been a fan of the channel, is closely related to the NES satellites that I've been playing with and doing a few experiments with. This is Sega's version, or what I consider Sega's version of the NES satellite. This is a remote arcade system with the remote arcade pad and receiver for the Sega Genesis. And I'm really excited to try this out because I think I've come to the realization that if I had to choose between Nintendo and Sega, I think I've always been kind of a Sega guy. It's what I grew up on. I did have an NES and I played a few games on it, but I did not play nearly as much as I did with the Sega Genesis, and I never knew that these existed. This is these came out in I think 92 or 93, right after the Sega Genesis came out in America, and yeah, I'm just surprised I never heard of them until a couple of months ago. So this it's kind of a unique design, especially when compared to the NES Satellite, which has 4 ports for players 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's essentially you plug all the controllers into the transmitter, which is nice because it's kind of backwards compatible with the controllers you already have. You plug those controllers into the transmitter, you plug the receiver into the base system, and then you can play up to 4 players, which is kind of neat. It expands the capabilities of the NES, which is one of the benefits. That's nice. But this one, you get new controllers that are RF, infrared, not RF, IR. They're infrared. This is the infrared receiver, and just like with the NES Satellite, it takes up 2 ports here. You have the ability to lock it to only single player mode or keep it on 2-player mode. I assume that's to lock it out, like if you had an annoying little sibling, you could switch it onto 1-player mode, single player, and then only the single player controller would be able to communicate to this. Probably just turns on and off the secondary receiver that's in there. And then for the controllers, there's a switch on the bottom here that tells you, or tells the system, which signal to send through player 1 or player 2, and it's just a toggle there. There's a mode button up here, which if you press and hold it while you are powering on the system, it can let it become more compatible with some older games. They have like a list of it in the instruction manual, which I was lucky enough to find. I'm excited about that. But the other thing is this has a really nice feel to it. It's got the 6-button controller and different style start button, which is interesting. And on the back here, we've got a nice little battery compartment, which takes 2 AAAs, not 6C batteries like the NES Satellite's transmitter. But granted, that thing's doing a little bit more heavy lifting. So what I'm going to try doing here is, I'm already thinking, as I'm sure you're probably thinking too, I have some experiments in mind with these because I not only got 1 pair, I may have gotten another one, and let's just say I may have 3 receivers. So with 3 receivers and I think 4 controllers, I can do some crazy things with that. I feel like I can do some nifty experiments. But the first thing I'm going to do is quite simple. I am just going to test the compatibility. Because one thing with the NES Satellite is it's only compatible with the NES. This, I believe, is compatible with every version of the Genesis, as well as, wait for it, drum roll please, the Sega CDx, which I happen to get my hands on. Now what you'll notice here is that these controller ports are pretty far apart, but I got a theory as to how I'll be able to use them, and we will get to that in a moment. But what I'm going to try first is we're going to start all the way back at the beginning of the Sega line, with at least with North America, and we are going to see if this bad boy is compatible with the Sega Master System. So we're going to cut over to that and we'll see how it goes. Alright, here we go with the Sega Master System power base. I don't know if you can see that here. Got our Master System with the, I've got a flash cart in there so we can play whatever game we want to, And we're going to try taking the receiver and plugging it into the two controller ports here. They're spaced appropriately apart. Seems to fit pretty snugly in there. And what we're going to do is power it on and see what we can do with our controller here. I'm on port player number 1, and we're going to see what we can do. Looks like the arrow keys work, or the arrow keys. The D-pad is working pretty well. So we'll try A. Okay, so B works. C works. And it makes sense that none of the other buttons would work. Probably start works too. Nope. That's right, because there was no start on the old controllers. In fact, here's one of the original controllers here so we can see. This is what we're working with. This is what the Sega Master System is actually recognizing. We've got the D-pad here, and start, and 1 and 2. So, start and 1 and 2 buttons, but we are playing the Sega Master System remotely. So let's just do James Bond here. So B and C, we're going to do load and start here. So B and C are the only 2 buttons we have access to. This is working pretty well so far though, I think. It's nice and responsive. I'm going to try it from a little farther away. See how this goes. Because that's honestly the, oh, there we go. One of my biggest gripes with the, alt or normal, interesting, with the Sega Master System is distance with the controllers. They're really not that long. Same with the Sega Genesis, really. I remember it was a bit of a challenge. Try to find adequate space. Oh, apparently fish are a problem for 007. Oh, and boxes, of course. Did I just die from a box? Oh, he's alright. Let's see if we can jump. Oh, man. Alright, let's climb this ladder before we're hit by another fish, apparently. Fish in boxes, or who knew? Apparently James Bond is, really has an issue with that. Ooh, look at briefcases full of money. I don't know if anybody else has ever played this game, but this is my first time. Oh boy. I'm just gonna try running. Oh, I can't shoot up. Okay, well that's ridiculous. Ooh, that's not good. Boom! And he's down. Alright, well, so I think we established what we came out to establish, which is the Master System. Check. On to the next one, we will be testing the Sega Genesis Model 1. Alright, we've got the Sega Genesis Model 1, and we're going to give this one a shot now. Same receiver. The one thing I believe is in our benefit is that all the Sega consoles have the same pitch or width between the controller ports. I think we're going to have some pretty good luck here too. You ready? Here we go. We're going to do a Street Fighter. And we got our controller here. Get past this. Looking pretty, feeling pretty responsive. We're going to do Super. I gotta go with Blanca. He's my guy. Alright, I'm going to step back a little bit, do a remote test here. Don't judge me on my abilities because I'm not a great Street Fighter fighter. Ow. Oh. Alright. Well, it does work, and I honestly can't say if I would be any better with, with anybody else, or with a different controller. We're going to try this again. Alright, first attack. Look at that. Not that it did me any good. One thing that I do like about this is that when I was a kid, I never had the 6-button controller. We had to use the, I'd play Eternal Champions a lot, and we would have to change the controller scheme with I think it was the start button in order to change it between 3 button and 6 button, which was a really big pain in the butt. Got her. All right. Well, I think it's fair to say that the Genesis Model 1 works. So let's switch it up to the Genesis Model 2. Alright, now we've got the Genesis Model 2, so I didn't go into much history on the old consoles, but I should have. So the Sega Master System was released in 1986 in North America. The Genesis Model 1 was released in 1989. I think actually North America was 91. Can't recall for certain. And the Genesis Model 2, which is the system I had growing up, was released in 94 in North America. So far, all of them have worked. And I think that's what I really like about Sega. I think that's what makes me a Sega guy instead of a Nintendo guy, is that this thing has so far been backwards compatible to a system that's been out for 8 years. Now, to be fair, Nintendo has had their share of backwards compatibility when it comes to games. For instance, you've got the handhelds specifically, where the Game Boy Advance played Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. The GameCube also had a Game Boy adapter that went with it. The Wii, the original Wii, could play GameCube games natively. The Wii U could play Wii games. So, to be fair, they have had their share of backwards compatibility as well. But I guess this just the standards here are what really impressed me. And Sega did their fair share of backwards compatibility too when it came to the Sega Genesis cartridges. They also had an adapter for the Master System that sits on top of the Sega Genesis and lets you play Master System games. They've got the 32X, which I've yet to find for an affordable price, but they each did their own things for compatibility. But without further ado, let's see. I have no qualms about this one working because this is the one that it was actually designed for. So we're going to test it out anyway. So we know it fits, and we know it worked with the Model 1. Looks like it's working with the Model 2. Yep. We're in good shape here. So, no surprise there. The Sega Genesis Model 2 is a go. Yep, we're fighting with Blanca here. Alright. So, Sega Genesis Model 2. You're probably asking, there's not many other Genesis models out there, right? Ended with Model 2? Well, funny you should mention it. There is a Sega Genesis Model 3, which was licensed out to Majesco. They made their own version of the Model 3, and we're going to see if the Remote Arcade System works with that too. Well, here, my friends, is the Sega Genesis Model 3. Tiny little thing, especially when compared to the remote system or remote arcade system in general. But we're going to give this one a shot. I don't see any issues with this because it looks like it's the same distance apart. And survey says it fits. It actually looks pretty darn cool on the front of it there. It's almost half as big as the whole console. That's insane. But yeah, this is the Genesis 3. It's a very simplified console. No lights. They replaced it with a little sticker there, but works pretty much the same as the other Genesis revisions. And as far as I can tell, yet again, there's no real reason to think that this wouldn't work, but here we go. Looking good again. Fully compatible so far up to the Sega Genesis Model 3. So you're now probably wondering, what other systems do we have to try out? Well, I already kind of gave you a preview of this. This is the Sega CDx, which has cartridge capabilities. You can play CDs and put batteries, AA batteries in here to actually use it as a portable CD player, which I think is just insane. And you can also play, of course, Sega CD games through the tray here. So I have a theory on how I can make this work, because I do have controller ports that are the same controller ports as everything else, and I also have 2 remote arcade systems. So we're going to see what we can make work here. So the one thing I didn't mention about the Genesis Model 3 was when it came out, and that was 1998. So it was a whole 4 to 5 years after the Genesis Model 2 came out, and the Sega CDx actually came out in 1994. So it came out in real close proximity to the Sega Genesis Model 2, but this just never caught on. I assume for the same reasons that the Sega CD really didn't catch on. I know CDs were kind of like a really expensive and very new thing at the time, and it's very hard to find good condition Sega CD games because they've been scratched up or they've gotten become the victims of disc rot, where it's oxidized inside the layers of the disc. But the Sega CDx is one of the rarest units that I've come across, and I now happen to own one. The one thing that's interesting about these is they have a unique power supply that only goes with them. It's a 9.5 volt, 1.5 amp power supply, and yeah, good luck finding those. I got lucky enough to find one, and now I'm going to put it to the test here. So I may have a CDX, but now if I want to plug in a remote or a controller, you know, I don't want my kids running around and pulling this thing off the TV, but I want the compact awesomeness of the CDX to play both Sega CDs and Sega Genesis cartridges. So I think I have a solution. As I mentioned, I have more than one of these receivers here. Now, the neat thing about these Sega Genesis consoles is, not the Genesis consoles, but about these arcade systems, is that I can switch which slot my controller controls. So if I make sure that this is in 2-player mode and I plug in player 2 output into controller port 1, and then I make sure that my controller here is switched to player 2, I'm going to try powering this on and see how this works. I got the same boot screen here. Let's see how this does. So I'm controlling it here. You can see I've still got my NES satellite because I've got a few more experiments to do, you guys. I got a list now. But let's see. Well, it's facing away. So the angle is a little tricky, but I am controlling it here. You can see me doing it there. Into Blanca. And I'm able to use the Sega Remote Arcade with a Sega CDx. Now, let's see how well this does at this angle. I mean, I'm, again, still not very good at, at Street Fighter. Don't judge me. But, oof. I think it works. So what I'm going to try next, if I can plug in one, then there's nothing preventing me from plugging in a second one. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch this one to single player. I don't really think it would matter because I'm not going to plug in player 2. I'm going to plug in player 1 into controller 2 over here. Like so. And then I have I have some AAA batteries hanging out here. We're going to test it with two controllers. So we have our second controller here, which I have now switched to player 1. I'm going to hit start here. Oh, here comes a new challenger. Look at that. Player 2. We'll do Vega. Alright. So, theoretically, I should be able to control Vega with controller port 1 and Blanca with controller port 2. So I've got two remote arcade pads controlling the Sega CDX. It looks a little wonky, but you know what? it works. And if it's between this and getting two corded controllers, I mean, I will take this any day. So I might have to hang on to two of these. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But I have a couple other experiments to try with the remote system. Just like I did with the NES satellites, I'm going to try playing the same game on two different systems, and I'm going to go with the classic Sonic for that, one of my favorites as a kid. And then I'm going to I'll probably try playing two different games on two different systems. And then, what was my other thought that I was going to try doing? I can't quite split them out unless I get some controller adapters to play 1 and 2 players. And even with the Sega CDx, with how it's split, I can't really do that either. But I'm gonna keep thinking about it. There might be some other creative possibilities here. Oh, and there is one system that I have that I don't think that the Sega Remote Arcade System is compatible with. I'm gonna break that out now. Alright, well, this one's kind of a bonus. This is the Sega Nomad, which not many people know about. I didn't know about it until probably last year when I started getting into all these systems. And this is the portable handheld. It's not the Game Gear, which is what most people are familiar about with Sega handhelds. But this is a fully remote or handheld Sega Genesis. You can see I've got Street Fighter plugged in here. I'm playing it on the system. Now what's really cool about this is, yes, it's a handheld Sega Genesis. That's super freaking cool. But not only is it a portable Sega Genesis with a screen built in, but there's an AV output up here, which you can plug into the Sega Genesis AV cable. And down here on the bottom, there's a second controller port. So you can play 2-player. One person can use the Nomad as a controller plugged into the system, and you can plug another controller into it and play it on the TV with somebody else. Or you can play 2-player on this little screen if you really want to sit that close to somebody. Now, like I said, this one's kind of a bonus one, mainly because I really just wanted to show it off. I'm super excited and proud to have found one of these for not an insane price. But the one thing that I see that's sad is it's not compatible with the Remote Arcade. Now, nor do I think it should be. I really don't think it would make much sense to have the Remote Arcade pad compatible with the Nomad. I will say, though, if I did get a controller adapter or a cable extender, I could totally plug the remote into it. It would defeat the purpose of it totally, but it would just be fun to try. So, the one system in the Sega Genesis lineup, where we've got the Master System. So, Master System, Genesis Model 1, Genesis Model 2, Genesis Model 3, CDx are all good to go. Sega Nomad, and of course the Game Gear, which doesn't actually have a controller hookup. Not so much. Well, if you get ideas for experiments for me to try with these systems, I'm going to post those videos next, probably in between some of the additional NES experiment videos that I have. And some of you probably noticed as I was moving my camera around that I do have another Sega CDx here, which the outside appears to be in better condition than the one that I have, but it's got an issue with it. And it sometimes spins CDs, sometimes it doesn't. I'm not sure if it's the laser, I'm not sure if it's the capacitors, I'm not sure if it's the spindle motor for the drive tray. Plays Genesis games just fine, but doesn't play CDs. So that's going to be another video series where I'm going to take that apart, and if that one goes well, I will also take apart the working one that I have, which I'm going to be way more cautious about. But I would need to swap the lasers to see if the laser is bad. And if the laser is bad, I can get into replacement laser, and then we'll do the install video for that too. But if the issue follows or is still there even with the new laser, well, we'll have to do some other things to see if we can get it fixed. But that is a video for another time. Until then, thanks for watching.